Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and joined by some part of Connor Reba. Oh, it's a hand. Okay,
Now it's further up on top of Connor's head, Reba.
there you go. All I see, like when you reach into, like when you have your hand, like all you see is some like flesh. So I was like, I don't know what I'm looking at here.
We were looking at the inside of Connor Rebush.
He's slowly stripping, and we're seeing a part of him very close to the camera. I'm not sure. All right, we're here for this UFC. I guess it's Danzig. I wanted to just say Gdansk because
I say Gdansk. I mean, I don't think they pronounce it Danzig in Poland, do they?
I think they do.
Oh, damn it! I should have known. I should have known that. I was like, okay, we're doing the original pronunciation. It's like Macau. You spell Macau differently. Just like every other Polish thing, the pronunciation has nothing to do with the spelling.
Well, I think my guess is if the G, you kind of drop the G a little,
yeah.
And so it's Danzig.
It's probably like a consonant we don't have. It's probably a G and a D sound that just sounds like a D to everyone who isn't Polish.
Yeah. So the UFC Danzig card, and I'm just gonna, I've got a lisp too, so fuck, it's a whole shit show trying to pronounce words like that.
Yeah.
But we're gonna try to burn through this because it's a burn through it kind of card.
Yeah, so, I agree. Not that it's a terrible card, but it is absolutely an afternoon fight pass card for the North American audience.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
Somebody else put it. I can't remember who now. I saw it on Twitter. It's a card filled with fights where it's like, oh, we really didn't expect you to lose that last fight, so now here's a fight we think you'll win.
Yeah. I think there was a post on r/MMA, by the way. I did not verify this, so this might be untrue. But somebody said that the UFC momentum, basically, of fighters on UFC Danzig is lower than any other card, at least this year, and it may have been ever. Although that also includes that's probably also because there's a lot of newly signed fighters from the Polish scene, which, as we were just saying before we started the show, is a very good regional scene.
Yeah, it is. We were just talking about Poland has, KSW really cornered a market in a way that a lot of other promotions have failed to do in their own home countries, where, not only do they put on consistent big shows, but they really made them about being in Poland and big Polish cards, and they captured a market that has boomed under their purview, under their under that organization, and has high participation rates, lots of prospects. Small gyms seem to produce good talent. Like, the camp Joanna Jędrzejczyk was coming out of was not any kind of major camp, and she came out with a really complete MMA game. So
for sure,
it's just it seems to be a country that not only gets a lot of MMA talent, but that the UFC is going to have trouble tapping well because they have a lot of competition.
Yeah. No, they're not breaking into China here and trying to create the interest. They are breaking into a region that already has its favorite promotion, and its favorite promotion is immensely popular. It's not just our favorite promotion, 3% of the country watches or whatever. It is very popular in Poland.
And can pay guys enough that they won't get more from a starting UFC contract.
Right,
They may not be making millions, but you could make probably $50,000 to $100,000 headlining KSW cards.
You make enough that you're not willing to step down to 10-10.
Yeah.
Just because it's the UFC. Like, the brand doesn't mean anything if you're already successful with another one.
Yeah. So still, this should be, UFC got some top flight prospects for this card. And should be a fun one. We're just going to jump right in. First fight up, featherweight bout, Felipe Arantes, Josh Emmett.
So glad Felipe Arantes is back on a card. I know we were both disappointed when he pulled from his last fight 2 days before. Seems to have recovered from whatever the undisclosed illness was very quickly. One would assume that he's more or less still in camp shape, although, you can never say anything about when a fighter does or doesn't peak or whatever. But I think this looks like a fun matchup. A lot of it, to me, really depends on whether or not Josh Emmett wrestles Felipe Arantes, which sadly is kind of the question you have to ask in every matchup. that Felipe Arantes has. Like, is his opponent going to take him down? If so, he is going to try to submit them from his back. If not, will they let him come forward and throw his kicks? I suspect that Arantes can convince Emmett to back up, but I am not convinced he can do so without giving up a leg for several easy takedowns. And for me, with that alpha male top game, I don't have any great fears about Emmett being submitted when in top position or being swept too easily. So I'm going to go ahead and say I think Josh Emmett takes Arantes down enough to win 2 rounds, but I think we're in for a pretty scrappy fight.
Yeah, this is also one of those fights too where Arantes is an inch taller than Emmett, but I expect Emmett to look a weight class bigger in the cage.
Yeah.
Like, Emmett's a pretty bricked up dude.
He is very solid.
He did not need to drop to featherweight, even if it may be a more natural weight class fit for him at 5'7". He was big enough for lightweight. And Arantes moving up from bantamweight, I kind of just feel like, especially that size and strength difference, is likely going to convince Emmett to wrestle hard in this fight, just because he knows he can. And so, yeah, I gotta pick Emmett here. Arantes he's not a good enough finisher as a striker. He doesn't strike in enough volume, and his dependency on kicks limits his ability to get you're either getting a flash head kick or you're chasing people with long punches that don't have a lot of snap on them.
Yeah.
And so it's otherwise submitting a fighter who's never been submitted and dealing with an alpha male top game that's pretty solid.
Yeah, so. And also the other thing I'm not too worried about the featherweight drop, which normally I hate. I almost always hate when somebody drops weight class, but I don't have as many concerns about conditioning as I would otherwise, because even more than they're scrambling, I think the one thing you can say about every single team alpha male fighter is that they are in peak condition when they fight.
Yeah.
They are extremely fit.
Yeah. Emmett can push a pace, and I'm not even sure he'll back up. I think he may feel like he's got enough of an advantage to just push Arantes.
If he's smart, he won't, because Arantes' game is nowhere near as effective when he can't kick.
Yep. Emmett is a sizable favorite, opening at -270, adjusting down to -370, and now slowly climbing to -329, but overall staying pretty flat after the drop. And Arantes opening at +190, moving up to adjusting up to +270, and is now at +259, also pretty stable. So
a little too wide for me to bet on.
Yeah, does feel. I wouldn't pick Arantes in this fight, but it is a little wide.
Yeah, it's not a matter of like did they favor the right guy. It is how much do I trust Josh Emmett?
Yeah,
not that much.
Not that much. No, he's not. He's a powerful puncher who doesn't knock people out and doesn't tend to wrestle nearly as much as he should. So it's not a skill set that's just like, oh yeah, it's a guaranteed winner right there.
Yeah.
Brings us to Aspen Ladd versus Lina Lansberg. I was saying on Twitter right before I got into this card is full of fights where I'm like, man, this has a really obvious winner, except that their opponent's really good at one thing that they're not good at.
Yeah.
Like, there are a bunch of fights like that on this card.
Honestly, I call that good matchmaking.
Yeah.
Like, these are absolutely get your momentum back fights, but we're not going to make it too easy for you to get your momentum back. We got to see if you can move forward or if you're stuck here. I like that.
And so my read that Lansberg versus Ladd is one of those, because Ladd really should win this fight. She's just a good, consistent, high output, forward pressure boxer with a good chin. And if she can get the fight to the ground, a great top game. Mm-hmm. Just a really good positional, high energy top game that beats people up and is very functional. Thing is that she's not a very good clinch fighter. Mm-hmm. And because she's not a very good clinch fighter, she's also not the most effective wrestler out there. and Lansberg is almost exclusively a clinch fighter. He's not good at anything other than clinch fighting.
Not particularly, no.
So Ladd should win. She should win every part of this fight that is not taking place in the clinch. But her pressure style might lead her right into the clinch over and over again. And if she can't bully Lansberg there, this could be a very, very close, ugly fight.
Yeah, Lansberg's gonna welcome any clinch opportunities with open arms. Like, it's not even a matter of Ladd just walking herself into the clinch. It's like Lansberg is going to pray that she walks into the clinch. She's going to grab her as soon as she's close enough.
Yeah. So I'm picking Ladd because I think that, just her work rate, and I think she can probably end up getting this fight down at some point. She's more physical. She's a better bully and a more consistent fighter round to round. But, there's a very high. This has like ugly split decision written all over it to me.
Yeah, and Lansberg, I mean, she's got some other moves in her back pocket too that could also give Ladd problems. Again, we both agree she's pretty much just a clinch fighter, but her jab is all right, especially if somebody's walking her down. She landed a lot of those jabs in that rematch with Lucia Pudilova. And I thought she narrowly lost that fight, but she was certainly in it the whole time. And again, the one thing that we said about Ladd last time when she was supposed to fight Jessica Eye was that she just doesn't have head movement. She feels things out with her jab. She comes forward. She looks comfortable in the pocket, but she takes a lot of small shots. If you are going to extend a hand to find out where her head is, you can find it pretty easily. And so, yeah, I agree. I think Lansberg might make this quite ugly. I think it's possible that if she just really guts it out, Ladd might lose a lot of momentum going down the stretch. But Aspen Ladd is the one who's the more proactive fighter. She's aggressive. She has a game that is very well-rounded, and it works. And I have to assume that the young prospect is going to be a little more eager to adjust and make that game plan happen than Lina Lansberg, who has looked just a little flat in all of her UFC performances. So I'm going with Ladd by decision.
Yeah, it's hard to really bet on somebody like Lansberg, whose game really depends on them getting a lot of control while not being a great athlete.
Yeah.
Like, you have to really lock somebody down and hold them, and then you see her fight with Pudilova, and there were a lot of 50-50 clinch exchanges where she was getting pushed around, and then, and it's just like, if you can't lock those positions down, that is literally the focal point of your game.
Yes.
So, odds on that fight, Ladd is a reasonable favorite, opening at minus 265, adjusting up to about minus 171 and falling back to minus 229 slowly. Lansberg opening at plus 185, adjusting down to plus 139 or so, plus 140, and then slowly moving up to plus 185. And frankly, those lines are moving further apart, and I don't think they should. I think they really should be pretty tight. This should be like a plus 150, minus 150 kind of fight.
Yeah, Aspen, again, as you said, like, there's an obvious this fighter is supposed to win in this matchup, but she has like 5 fights under her belt. Like, you just can't be that confident about it.
No, you really can't at all. Brings us to a welterweight bout. Salim Touahri, Warlley Alves.
And I know your masochistic ass was as well, but I was looking forward to Judo Jim Wallhead versus Warlley Alves. It sounded like a crazy mess of a fight that I wanted to see. And instead, Salim Touahri has stepped in on like a week's notice, few days. Hasn't been that long since.
Yeah, just like a week.
Yeah, Jim Wall had pulled out very recently. So, but this is one of the, impressive Polish prospects on the card. Salim Touahri has. There's a weird pattern with every single one of these Polish fighters. They all seem to have lost like their first fight, and then they just rattle off a long series of pretty impressive wins. Touahri, it's hard to say given the amount of experience, but he does seem to have an issue with keeping himself dangerous and competitive down the stretch. He is a guy who's used to having a lot of early finishes. He's got a lot of first-round knockouts. And then, you know, his most recent decision was a majority decision, and that was against arguably the worst fighter he faced in his last 3 fights. So that kind of suggests to me that he's going to struggle to keep his game working the same way it does early, even against not particularly impressive opponent. But he's got some nice skills. He's got heavy hands. He's got good timing. He seems pretty accurate. He can be a little rote with his combinations, but he's more comfortable in the pocket than he might seem at first. He keeps a nice high guard and likes to counter with short little combinations, mostly revolving around the right hand, but he's pretty good at it. It's a very straightforward game. It also includes, of course, some nice takedowns. He does have some decent top control, although I wouldn't say he's the best ground and pound artist of the Polish guys on this card. We'll see some pretty impressive examples of that later. Against Warlley Alves, like, this is the thing. Anytime you have to break down a Warlley Alves fight, just all the possibilities and things that could go wrong just start whirring around in your head. I have to expect Warlley Alves with a full camp is going to have a solid advantage over Salim Touahri. I think it's even likely that, given the notion that Touahri might fade down the stretch, especially on short notice, might lose his power down the stretch, that Warlley Alves, who is known for going insanely all out, balls to the wall from the opening bell, that may actually work here. It might work a lot better than it does against other opponents, because the times I have seen Touahri in trouble is generally when somebody has pressured him a lot early, has stayed in his face, and not allowed him to get his timing for those nice short shots. So I'm going to go with Warlley Alves, but Touahri is a hard hitter with solid fundamentals, and I'm absolutely not counting him out as somebody who could clip Alves just after he exhausts all of his energy stores in the 4th minute of the fight. So, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Big things for me really with this fight is that I think this is just going to, Touahri's lack of wrestling is going to cost him.
Yeah, I've seen some decent shots out of him, but
well, yeah, offensively he may not lack it, but you know, like if you watch his Bayzit Katkohu, I don't know, Katkohu, whatever.
Bayzit Katkohu. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I hope it's not a Polish name, because otherwise I know I got it
no,
wrong.
He's Russian. But if you watch that fight, he got taken down really easily, really quickly early in that fight. And the only reason he got off his back is the ref stood them up. Like, that is the only reason he got the knockout win he had, was that the other guy was in his guard and the ref was like, oh, okay, I'll stand it up. And then he knocked the guy. But I mean, that's, you know, that shows how powerful he is, that it really, you know, one stand up and then one like short, ugly left hook later, and the dude was out cold on the canvas. But it does seem like exactly the wrong. This seems like the wrong matchup for him. Yeah. Hope I really want, and I mean I think maybe Alves even did learn something finally going into his matchup with Usman. Like, he looked like a more controlled, more patient fighter. It just didn't matter because Kamaru Usman was a nightmare matchup for Warlley Alves. It's
like Kamaru Usman. That's the wrong time to realize you might need to make a change.
Yeah,
like, you want to make that drastic lifestyle change just before, by far, the toughest matchup of your career.
Yeah, the right time would have been his Brian Barberena fight. That was the right time to make the change, but he did not. This feels like, even if he hasn't adjusted, even if he doesn't fight patiently, this is just the right matchup for his style. Somebody that he can go in and attack early and quickly with a takedown or with aggressive grappling, jump on a submission, or somebody he can just pick at and try and be cautious and use what's a pretty reasonable technical stand-up game when he's fresh and thinking. You know, this is a dude who, even after just gassing to hell against Alan Jouban, did a really good job staying safe and consistent and like fighting to strength and being patient, surviving. So I gotta think Warlley Alves is gonna win this fight. It would be
I'm with you.
a complete like chance one punch KO win, which this dude, this Touahri looks like he has the skill for. But
Alves is also like he's been rattled a few times, but he's certainly not fragile. It would still be a shock if he were just put out with one punch.
So odds on that fight. Let's see, Warlley Alves, where the hell is that? Oh, there it is. He's a pretty sizable favorite, opening -315, adjusting to -304, and moving up and down a little to -300. But these odds just opened because this fight only just got announced recently. So basically at 300, -300 right now. And Touahri opening at +235, now at +242. So those... that feels about right. Alves has his troubles, but he deserves to be a reasonable favorite over a newcomer who has a lot to prove in terms of being more than just a power puncher. Oops. All right. That brings us to Artem Lobov, Andre Fili. I like this fight a lot. This is a good, tough fight to pick. Like... coming off his Haqparast win, and even like the Gabriel Benitez, Haqparast, even with the Yair Rodriguez loss in there, it feels like this would have been a much easier fight to give to Fili. Like, oh, he's clearly developing, progressing, making these jumps in his game, keeping his creativity and getting more technical. And then he had that Calvin Kattar fight, and it just kind of seemed like maybe he's not really getting that much more technical. He's made jumps in his game. He's getting more like he's using his creativity. He's gained some patience, but maybe he's not actually becoming a sharper technical fighter. Because
that's a good distinction. I would say that I think that Fili, he is gaining the benefits of experience.
Yeah.
Those skills, but as far as the actual like technical fundamentals of fighting, I think he's more or less the same guy he was when he came into the UFC.
Yeah, because that's kind of what the Kattar fight looked like. Just there weren't a lot of new. There wasn't faced with somebody who had a sharper technical kickboxing game. He just got outworked, And that's kind of weird for this because I have a feeling that Fili that Lobov might kind of have a sharper technical kickboxing game than Andre Fili too. The bigger thing, I maybe even not sharper quite, because I realize that Lobov has been kind of a poster child for ugly technique and swinging hard for a lot of people. A little undeservedly, frankly. I mean, there are dudes who swing a lot uglier than Artem Lobov does. But in his Cub Swanson fight, like that to me really showed an Artem Lobov that is actually functionally trying to become a more consistent technical fighter, who looked sharper on the counter, and who the biggest thing with this fight is who has learned to push a mean fucking pace.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where that came from, because it is not the dude who fought Alex White.
I just like to imagine that Artem Lobov is the one benefiting from all of Conor McGregor's cardio training.
It seems like it.
The whole crew is just running and biking constantly, but Artem is the only one whose fitness is improving.
It does seem that way. Because the Cub Swanson fight, the pace in that was amazingly brutal.
Yeah, they set a record, right, for significant strikes in a featherweight fight.
Yeah, it was, like 400 and something or something between the two of them. It was insane. And I think like that pace alone may make me feel it's enough to beat Fili, because the piece I think is missing from Fili's game, he's kind of a little bit like the I want to call this like the Cole Miller conundrum, which is that he's a striker who's not comfortable countering or leading, and is really only comfortable in like the brawl, where it's Andre Fili, like he just feints a ton that doesn't lead to much to lead because he doesn't want to lead. But if you go after him, he doesn't counter well at all. He just sort of picks his chin up and swings his arms and tries to scare you off.
He does not like being in the pocket. That's basically it. He's afraid of being caught in the pocket if he leads. And when you chase him, he's not going to plant his feet and throw because that means agreeing to fighting in the pocket. And I think really that comes down to technical deficiencies even more than it does anything like mental with his style. Like he just against certain pocket punchers, like guys like Calvin Kattar. Maybe I can say this because I have the hindsight. I have the benefit of hindsight because I picked Kattar in that fight because I thought he was a bad style matchup. And it was because he's a good combination counterpuncher in the pocket. And Fili is just not sharp there. He doesn't have the skills.
And Lobov isn't the sharpest combination puncher, but he's good on the counter, and he's very comfortable. He's really pretty comfortable, very very comfortable countering and pretty comfortable leading. Like he's there to be hit, and that's a huge problem. He's not, he's pretty stiff and upright, and he's not hard to find if you put volume on him. But Fili putting volume on guys is not his strong suit. Like you go back to look at his wins, and his Haqparast win and his Gabriel Benitez win, and both of those are kind of like people who also weren't comfortable leading, or who weren't comfortable countering rather, and let Fili push his own pace in those fights and be creative and mix things up the way he wanted to. And I don't think that Lobov is going to let him do that. I think Lobov is going to go after him and try and take the fight to him. And so I don't know. I'm going to lean Lobov weirdly, like just on volume. And I know that feels wrong, but I just don't think that Fili is dangerous enough when he's moving backwards, and he's not effective enough when he's moving forwards.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm going to stick with Fili for a couple reasons. One, I think it is not as the assumption that Lobov is just going to be able to counterpunch in the pocket. His game is still pretty limited and straightforward. He's got a good low kick as well, but other than that, it's mostly like a straight left hand and some hooks. And the defense is not great.
No.
It's especially like it's okay when he's anticipating, just like Conor McGregor. He has a good move that leads into a counter, but he does not have a system of defensive moves that all fit together in any moment whenever he needs them. And so, Cub Swanson set the record for most significant strikes landed in a featherweight fight for that reason. Yeah. Even as Lobov was impressing all of us, he was also eating a shit ton of punishment. The thing is that Andre Fili is actually pretty good from kicking range. He's got quite a good kicking game and a varied one. And I won't say it's like the smoothest thing in the world, but if Lobov does not press forward a lot, I agree. He might be very well served to do so. He's actually, like his footwork is probably at its best when he's pressuring. The low kicks and the wide punches help him to cut down angles, and he can just kind of pressure you until you feel forced to do something, at which point his counterpunching becomes a real boon. But I've also seen way too much of Artem Lobov sort of being dazzled by what his opponent is doing and falling into the role of the counterpuncher. Rather than being proactively a counterpuncher, he's just starts waiting and hoping that he'll be able to get the timing on the right opening. If Fili can basically stick to the clinch and the wrestling and kicking range, if he can just avoid the pocket, I think he can pile up enough damage to beat Lobov here. And I think, like, again, I do think that Andre Fili we have been seeing him getting better. We have seen him be more accustomed to the pressures of a fight. The Haqparast fight was good, but I also think you have to say he didn't fall apart in the Calvin Kattar fight. It was, I think, a brutally difficult style matchup for him against a really sharp combination counter puncher. I think that is like the worst, especially one who has, like arms that are the length of a normal human's arms. You know, one that could match Fili's range, which Lobov certainly can't do with his little T-Rex stumps.
No.
So, yeah, I think you got to look at that fight and say, yes, it's a bad style matchup for Fili. He fell apart. Lobov is not exactly the same as Calvin Kattar, not by any stretch.
No, God, no.
He can't be equally as tough in that way. And B, Andre Fili still dealt with that difficulty a lot better than he would have in the past. He is not, I think, like shambolically running into brawls at every opportunity now. He was still trying to pick his shots and keep himself safe. He just could not match Kattar technically. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Andre Fili. I think the well-roundedness of his game is really going to be to his advantage here. I just think Lobov is still a little too limited. I think his ceiling of he's very stylistically dependent. I think he can have a surprisingly competitive fight with someone like Cub Swanson, but like the moment you had Lobov fight a Mirsad Bektic, even like a much lower ranked fighter, I think he would get thrashed. And I'm not confident that Andre Fili is, with his build and his eclectic style, is the easiest or most predictable sort of opponent for Artem to counterpunch.
No, it's true. It's true. I don't know. I mean,
I definitely know
it's
where
this
you're
weird thing
coming
of like who they've beat, and you know, Fili's best win is easily Haqparast, and that's Haqparast being a fighter who is just very like, let me take my foot off the gas at all times and just kind of let you do whatever you want. And for Lobov, it's not like his best win is way better. It's Teruto Ishihara, who's a worse fighter. But it's also like, I don't know. It's just neither guy inspires confidence in me, and I think I like the pace Lobov has been fighting at better than what I like what Fili's been doing, because I don't know. Guys who just come out of Team Alpha Male as strikers just do not inspire confidence in me, I think.
Yeah. How much of that pace, though, is the fact that Cub Swanson was just in the pocket the whole damn time?
I think...
I mean, Cub gave him that pace. Cub set the record for landed strikes in a featherweight fight. Cub was the one who was constantly engaging in the boxing range.
True, but, Lobov also spent a lot of time, like, walking back Teruto Ishihara in that fight, and pressuring him and throwing shots. And I think it's something that, like, Lobov didn't seem uncomfortable fighting that pace.
No, not at all.
And Fili just does. Fili looks like he pushes a much faster pace than he does.
Yes, a lot of bullshit.
Lots of bullshit, and I don't know. We'll find out.
I totally get it. I understand the reservations. I do not feel good picking Andre Fili. I also wouldn't feel good picking Artem Lobov.
I don't. So let's see. Fili opened at minus 195, adjusted up to minus 141, and is drifting slowly out to minus 167. Lobov opening at plus 155, adjusting down to plus 110, and now at plus 138. So I'm fine with these odds being razor close, honestly. The closer they stay, the better. Mm-hmm. Both guys just have too much to prove in terms of any kind of consistency in their career.
For sure.
So I feel like I'm taking crazy pills picking Artem Lobov, but that's just how it is.
Sometimes these things happen in MMA. Sometimes you pick Artem Lobov.
Sometimes, I swear. Middleweight bout next: Sam Alvey, Ramazan, Emeev.
You know that the most existentially meaningless fight on the card, which was Trevor Smith versus Ramazan Emeev. You know, there is no more perfect replacement for Trevor Smith from my perspective than fucking Sam Alvey. You gotta respect the Alvey hustle, man. He's so active. He never changes.
It's like if Donald Cerrone never had never had fun fights.
It is kind of.
But was a really nice guy. Like that's the
everybody likes Sam Alvey. And yeah, I think like this is an interesting matchup. Trevor Smith would have been an interesting matchup for Ramazan Emeev because Trevor Smith is going to grind as much as Emeev likes to grind. Alvey is an interesting matchup because every time Emeev comes forward, Alvey's going to try to hit him on the chin. And it's all he does. That is like literally that is all Sam Alvey does is he waits for you to lead and he tries to crack you with a right hook or a left uppercut. And then if you wait long enough, he has gotten marginally better these days at taking the initiative, but usually with one punch at a time, maybe two. I mean, his corner has to scream at him to get him to throw more than one punch at a time. Throwing more than two is usually out of the question, which is strange because earlier in Alvey's career, we did see him in a lot of scrappier fights. He has just like mentally trained himself out of that pace of fighting. He just likes a nice, slow, controlled pace. And I guess he figures he fights often enough. It doesn't matter that much if he has a super consistent winning style. You're going to catch some of these guys. And a lot of the other ones, he's going to slow down to such a crawl for fear of him catching them that he will be able to beat them on points anyway. Ramazan Emeev is probably not that kind of guy. He's also got a pretty straightforward game. Like there's not a ton of variety to what he likes to do in a fight, but most of that consists of coming forward and trying to engage in the clinch, trying to force people back. Occasionally he will work his takedowns. He's got a pretty solid top game when he does that, but mostly he is trying to mash people against the fence and wall and maul them. And boy, that just sounds like that is going to happen to Sam Alvey. Like if somebody's game plan is to get Sam Alvey to back up and then to keep him there, I mean, really that is, well, the only thing that makes this interesting is that Emeev can definitely be caught in the way in and Alvey can definitely catch him. And Alvey is surprisingly difficult to take down and surprisingly strong in the clinch as well. So he's not going to be out of this fight any moment. It's just that he's not going to do much to turn it into a fight if he can't land that perfect shot, which means we're probably looking at about 3 rounds of Ramazan Emeev mashing Sam Alvey into the fence.
Yeah, part of me feels like making the gut pick on Alvey here.
I can see it, man, but you can see it all the time.
Like Emeev can be caught. He's not a hard fighter to hit because he has such a specific thing that he wants. And he throws hard. He's got a good right hand when he throws it, but he doesn't throw it that often. Mm-hmm. And his clinch mashing is good, but it's not like otherworldly. Like
I like that we could call it mashing. It's a real Frank Reynolds kind of vocabulary choice. Mash. He's mashing him in the clinch.
Yeah. It's not the kind of thing where it's like, oh man, once he gets you in the clinch, it is game over. You know?
No, it's once he gets you into the clinch, you're in the clinch.
Yeah. And it sucks too because the best part of his game is by far being on the mat on top of somebody. Like dude has serious ground and pound, is like loves to jump on front headlocks, has good strong submission skills everywhere, and is a fun, like if he gets Sam Alvey down, he will almost certainly wrap this up. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't, this is just going to be funky. Probably the biggest problem that makes picking Sam Alvey hard is that Sam Alvey is so inactive in the clinch.
Yeah.
Like for somebody who is a very willing clinch fighter in Sam Alvey, he is just the least active clinch fighter you can imagine.
I would call Sam Alvey a good clinch fighter. I would just say that good here is sort of divorced from, what wins you a fight. Like it's not effective in that sense, but like he clearly knows what he's doing.
Oh yeah, he shuts people down. He keeps them from hitting him.
Yep.
But he also does not hit them at all.
Nope.
So yeah, this is tough. I'm gonna pick Emeev because the biggest things I'm picking Emeev honestly on are Sam Alvey sounds like he has an abominable weight cut that he's in the middle of. He's dropping 34 pounds this week.
That's awful.
Yeah.
That's insane. He should not be allowed to do that.
No. And it's in Europe. So he's traveling and cutting a shit ton of weight on somebody's home turf who's going to have a lot to prove in their debut that they belong. And they're probably just going to push a pace and wear him out and Emeev for the win. But this could be a very ugly fight.
Oh, yes. I think it will be.
Let's see. Emeev is the favorite, opening at plus 100, adjusting down to minus 126, and now at minus 149. Dropping significantly in the past couple of hours, my guess being because Alvey is publicizing his bad weight cut. And Alvey opening at minus 140, adjusting to minus 105, and moving up to, was it plus 112, and then the last couple hours up to plus 124. So those lines are heading north in a hurry. His line is heading north in a hurry as that news spreads. Brings us to a bantamweight bout. Damian Stasiak versus Brian Kelleher. And is there any fighter in the UFC that I know less about than Brian Kelleher?
Probably not.
Because
there's just not enough footage.
I have a picture of how he fights, an idea, but the idea of how he fights is built off of footage of him like 4 years ago, and then 2 like 1 round weird wins and losses, and that's it.
You can also find like the 10 seconds that lead into his finish of Julio Arce before he got into the UFC.
Yeah.
You can catch the highlight video online.
Yeah, there are like 10 seconds of relevant footage from him. Overall, there's like 5 minutes of relevant Brian Kelleher footage from the past 5 years.
He's got to be, I mean, he's got to be the best fighter in the UFC with so little footage easily. Like,
yeah.
As far as skill, it is shocking that somebody as well-rounded and clearly game as Brian Kelleher, that there is like collectively 6 minutes of relevant footage of him fighting online.
Yeah.
If that.
So the question here against Damian Stasiak is, does he get submitted? That's really the question. Stasiak was probably going to make this a really tough fight on Kelleher. Stasiak is a much craftier puncher than it seems like he would be, especially given how hittable he is. He picks his shots well, and he has a wide shot selection, and he's gotten a lot better at using his karate background to time strikes. Like, he really showed that in the Munoz fight, timing a lot of step-in uppercuts and really just fighting, having somebody in front of him in Munoz who couldn't hurt him that badly, let Stasiak show off a lot more of his kickboxing, which was reasonable, but also not overly powerful. Stasiak's a good wrestler and a good grappler, but he's, in general, he can be physically overwhelmed. That's really the key here with Kelleher, is that Kelleher is very capable of being physically overwhelming. He's a very fast, aggressive power wrestler who likes to throw hard, who likes to come forward and stay on people and mix things up. And it's a live by the sword, die by the sword way of fighting. So when he wins, he's got a lot of finishes, lots of submissions, some knockouts mixed in. When he loses, 70% of the time, it's by submission.
Yeah, you would have thought that was over, but then that damn Marlon Vera fight.
Yep.
He loses, and once again, maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe it's just a freak accident, but it had to be another submission. It just has to be. It has to fit this pattern of Brian Kelleher's losses that makes you sort of worry about him going forward. And
Stasiak has submissions not just over guys like Davey Grant and Philip Payich, who are not great grapplers, but relatively at the time inexperienced Mike Grundy too, who's a very good wrestle grappler from top position. Stasiak is very capable of being an aggressive sub hunter off his back.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be a real test of Kelleher's ability to stay safe.
Yeah.
Because Stasiak is hard to finish. I don't think he's ever been finished, in fact. You can only outwork Damian Stasiak. And Kelleher is capable of that, but it's going to be a constant battle of how safe does he stay in the meantime. I don't know. I'm gonna pick Kelleher to get this win.
Yeah.
But I am going to be super unsurprised if Stasiak hooks up a triangle or an arm bar and finishes him within a round or two.
Yeah, I can see that. Stasiak's guard game alone, because Kelleher is probably going to end up in that guard. That is,
and he's going to be aggressive there. He's going to push an aggressive fight.
Yeah, it's not just going to end up there. Like, as with the Lina Lansberg fight, Stasiak is going to let that happen. He would probably love nothing more than to get a chance to submit a fighter like Brian Kelleher from his back. He'll certainly feel safer there than he will on the feet. But the distinction you made about Pedro Munoz, like, not only is Pedro Munoz a lot more hittable than most fighters at his level, he just cannot not be countered. But as you pointed out, he was not really able to hurt Stasiak. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Stasiak is extremely tough.
Yeah.
He just takes a shot like nobody else. He's never been knocked out. And that is saying something, because he really has taken some leather in the UFC. But Brian Kelleher has some pop in his hands. He really does have some heavy hands, and he knows how to pressure. He knows how to pressure even without having to throw a lot of volume. He knows how to make you sort of jump and wait and hesitate and back up, waiting for what he's going to do next. Stasiak was able to do those kinds of things against Pedro Munoz because Munoz fought at a very predictable pace, just throwing like every 0.75 seconds, he's going to throw the right hand. Stasiak could just say, basically, I'm going to throw my rote uppercut counter, and it'll probably catch him because he's Pedro Munoz. And that is not the case of Brian Kelleher. He's a lot craftier at landing a shot and getting off to an angle or setting up a counter to your counter. It really does just come down to, can he not get submitted when he takes Damian Stasiak down, which is a great worry, but also is a pretty narrow path to victory for Damian Stasiak. It's really the only way I can imagine him winning this fight.
Yeah.
So I'm still going to go with Brian Kelleher as well, but the caveat remains. Damian Stasiak, he's in weird ways better than I think any of us expected him to be, and is uniquely dangerous for what seems to be Brian Kelleher's one glaring weakness.
Yeah, absolutely. This is
another one of those fights you mentioned.
Yep. All right. Odds on this. Let's see. Stasiak is a very mild underdog. Opened at plus 125, adjusted to minus 101, is currently at minus 103. And Kelleher opening at minus 165, adjusting to minus 130, and is currently at minus 121. So odds riding pretty close to dead even there. I think that Kelleher could be a little bit of a bigger favorite, but Stasiak inside the distance is plus 341 or 314, which is no submission pick, or under 2.5 rounds is plus 165. But if Kelleher wins, it could very easily be a decision. So Stasiak inside the distance might be something to look at. I don't know.
If you need a flyer, if you need a chance bet, that may be one of the better ones on this card.
Heavyweight fight next: Anthony Hamilton, Adam Wieczorek. And
it's as good an effort as I was gonna muster.
Let's see, is this you or me? Let's see. You.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now my brain is now combining all of the Polish names that I've seen into one person. Hold on. I'm gonna have to remember which Adam Wieczorek fight I watched last so I can
He's the big, pasty, hard-hitting guy who can't fight off his back foot.
Yes, he is the guy who reminded me in all of the worst ways of a giant Donald Cerrone. When I was watching, he was
Oh
very
God!
comfortable.
Like somebody made a Donald Cerrone clone and it went wrong and it just ended up with like a gland problem and none of the no Mega Cerrone, no.
Yeah, you pump the bad clone of Cerrone full of that Bane juice, and
exactly.
Adam. This is one of the weirder fighters in the card to me. I having watched a few of his fights, I find it hard to really understand. Like I want a stronger pattern for why Adam Wieczorek is 8-1. You know what I mean? Like not that he's a bad fighter and he has a lot of finishes, but it is not process driven.
Watch any two of them and be like, oh, I get it.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I'm like, what is his game? He can be backed up and hit early, and he can be forced into the clinch and taken down. All of that seems to be especially problematic early in the fight.
Yeah.
He's just really opportunistic. I guess that's my cop-out way of describing why he's effective.
I would also say he fights hard. He's reasonably athletic and he fights hard throughout a fight, whether he's tired or not.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is why I think that those things that are a problem early can go away, because he's just fresher. Like he just is more willing to fight hard as the fight goes on.
That sounds about right. That's probably it. Because I remember most distinctly his fight with he fought someone whose name is Philip Toe.
Okay.
His fight with God damn it.
So distinctly. So just it's fresh in your mind.
It was a really recent one. But the name is not on Topology. Okay, anyway. He was watching the fight. He was fighting and he got taken down instantly. He got mashed into the turnbuckle for a good portion of the bout. And
is it Zumana Cisse?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the one. He was fighting Zumana Cisse. He got pushed into the turnbuckle. He got taken down. He got his legs chewed up with low kicks. Just nothing was happening. But then it did kind of seem like Cisse wore himself out a little bit and got rolled over. And then Wieczorek just kept punching him from top position until the referee had to save Cisse. And like that's the kind of that's the way, I guess, that Adam Wieczorek wins. How is that going to work against Anthony Hamilton? Well, that depends. Have we learned to call Anthony Hamilton's fights yet?
No.
Doesn't feel like it, because I'm pretty sure.
Adam Wieczorek isn't a worse fighter than Daniel Spitz,
who I believe you called probably one of the worst fighters in the UFC on the last time we discussed him.
Yeah.
That was not that long ago, by the way.
No.
It was less than a month ago. How is Anthony Hamilton fighting again so soon?
He was going to retire, and then Wieczorek's opponent got injured, and Hamilton was like, I guess I'll just fight again.
Oh, God.
I know.
Yeah, I just don't have any faith in Anthony Hamilton anymore.
No.
Like, that chin is a problem.
Yeah.
And, like, you don't want to get knocked out, like, instantly. Also, by guys who are not at all expected to knock you out. Like, Marcel Fortuna and Daniel Spitz both knock you out in the first round, and it's very reminiscent of the times you got knocked out in the first round by Todd Duffy and Alexei Olenek. Like, it's just too much of a problem, I think, for a guy whose game is basically run forward and freight train people off their feet. That being said, that is exactly the style that I would expect to work best against Adam Wieczorek in the early going, is someone who just instantly gets in his face and tries to tear him down to the ground.
Yeah.
But the freshness thing comes in there. Anthony Hamilton on short notice, never being a particularly impressive stamina athlete anyway. I'm going to assume that as long as Wieczorek survives, he can turn it around and find some way to, like, boop Anthony Hamilton into a TKO loss. Yeah,
I learned my lesson with Spitz. I'm just not picking Anthony Hamilton ever again. That's really all there is to it. Wieczorek is absolutely capable of losing a fight to Anthony Hamilton, and that's fine, but he's not easy to hurt. He is easy to take down. He's easy to work over, but he doesn't seem like an easy fighter to hurt. And he seems like he's able to fight well multiple rounds. So that means he's going to have opportunities, and that's enough for me.
Yep.
You know? Odds on that fight, Wieczorek is opened at -165, adjusted up to +114, and then drifted all the way back to -144. And Hamilton opened at +125, dropped all the way down to -140, and has risen back up to +119. So, yeah, I mean, these odds should be dead even, but Wieczorek, I just wouldn't pick Hamilton for anything at this point.
Yeah.
Fool me 5 times, shame on you. Fool me 6, shame on me. All right. Brings us to a lightweight bout. Marcin held Nasrat Haqparast. And this is another one of those fights where, like, I mean, every fight for Held now has to be you should win this, but, you know, Haqparast looks like a interesting fighter that will develop well.
Mm-hmm.
He throws with a lot of power. He doesn't have a deep striking game. He's not very good off his back foot, but given the opportunity to stalk forward, he has power and he throws quickly. Like he's got real hand speed going for him. And then he's an aggressive power wrestler with a good top game. Somebody who can get on people and who can open up with strikes, who can hunt for submissions quickly, who can stay after him.
Someone who's totally comfortable letting you move when he's on top of you so he can just hit you as you try to escape.
Yep. Like just a good wrestle grappler off the European scene. Thing is that he's pretty green and his level of competition isn't great. And Marcin Held has gotten to a point, he has developed consistently to a point where it's no longer a matter of technical ability, really, with Marcin Held. It may eventually, honestly, just be a matter of athleticism and of starting with a style that is fundamentally, like, he's had to build himself out of for years now. Because he started out with this, like, you know, pseudo Imanari, leg locks all the time, exciting bottom grappler style. And it worked for years. But every time he faced really good competition, it didn't work. And that has always continued to be the case. And it's gotten to be especially the case as he's gotten to the UFC and faced bigger competition. People that, you know, and to say he hasn't beaten any good competition. Like, he beat Patricky Freire, he beat Alexander Sarnovsky, but he got to the UFC and, you know, suddenly he's winning only the striking portions of fights.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, he hasn't looked like a washout in the UFC.
No, he doesn't look like a washout. It's just somebody who's had to relearn, how to be a functional fighter.
They're all close. He would have beaten Diego Sanchez if he had just stayed striking with him, which he could have done. He came very close to beating. He was very competitive with Joe Lauzon.
He probably beat Joe Lauzon. Thinks Marcin Held beat Joe Lauzon.
Yeah, I thought he did too.
Lauzon won that fight. I was okay with that, but Lauzon didn't think he won it.
At the very least, it was super competitive, and then he was doing pretty good, I think, in the Damir Hadzovic fight.
He was beating Damir Hadzovic easily. Like, that was him. Like, everybody was like, oh, Marcin Held finally got it. He's on his way to a win. And then he started round 3 with a super obvious takedown that Hadzovic kneed his head through the stratosphere on. And that should mean, like, Haqparast should be a fight that he can win. Haqparast is not technically well-rounded or dynamic to the ways that that Hadzovic is. Like, Hadzovic has a lot of striking tools he can go to, even though he's not the most technically soundly put together striker. He tends to just kind of throw random power strikes at any time. He's got a much bigger variety, and Haqparast doesn't have that. He's not good fighting backwards at all. And Held has become very good at fighting forwards as a striker, like a good, aggressive boxer. He's still wooden, and he's not the best athletic fighter in the world, but he works really well behind a jab. He throws good variety. He keeps a pace on people, and he's gotten a really nice clinch boxing game. So I don't expect Haqparast to be able to out wrestle or out grapple Held at this point in his career. And I think this should be a solid win for Marcin Held, just over a guy who's too green at this point.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of when we were discussing Matthew Lopez's UFC debut.
Yeah.
Like stylistically and experience-wise, there's a lot of similarities between Haqparast and someone like Lopez. And Lopez just had a tough time in that debut because he just wasn't ready for it yet. And that seems like what's going to happen here. I agree. I can't really add much to that, except that Marcin Held, if Marcin Held loses this, how can you have any faith in him going forward? Because I can imagine the ways in which he allows Haqparast to have top position.
Yeah.
Like anybody who has a really strong top game is automatically going to be a danger for Marcin Held, not because he's not a good enough wrestler or good enough, evasive striker or whatever, a good enough ring general to prevent that from happening, but because he seems to allow those things to happen. That is it's a habit, that's just ingrained into the way he fights. He's trying to get away from it, but it's clearly not an easy struggle. The big thing though is that Marcin Held has shown a really, really good shot in his recent fights. And I think if there is anything that is going to tire out and panic a young top position grappler, it is being stuck on his back, being forced to try to escape against a very experienced grappler on top of him. And Marcin Held's pace is going to really come into play there when Haqparast is not just having to move away from strikes, which I think he can do comfortably enough. He doesn't exhaust himself moving. He seems to be in very good shape, but being tense and constantly having to wrestle through scrambles and things like that is going to wear him out. So I'm taking Marcin Held, and I think like the Matt Lopez fight, I'm thinking we're looking at a late finish as Haqparast absolutely loses his energy and has that adrenaline dump. So I'm thinking Marcin Held by third round submission.
Yeah, another kind of similar fight to this might be like, although very different styles of fighters, so don't take it just as like similar in that way, but similar setup would be like Oliver Enkamp and Nordin Taleb, where it's like Enkamp very obviously had something for Taleb, but it was too early. And
in both of those allegories, the fighter, like, absolute, the prospect had their moments. Like, they brought him to the UFC for a reason. It's just like, this is not how you match prospects if you want them to win.
Yeah, and it's funny. How old is Haqparast?
22, 23.
Okay, so finally in his career, Marcin Held won't not only be the more experienced veteran, but actually the older fighter too.
Yes, it's actually very rare as a 25-year-old veteran of 35 fights.
Yeah,
whatever it is, 32, whatever.
All right, odds on that fight: Marcin Held is a larger favorite than he deserves to be at this point in his career. Just given recent standings, opened at -405, adjusted down to -527, and is now climbing reasonably quickly back up to -403. Haqparast opened at +285, jumped up to +367, and is falling back down to +316. So those odds should not be that high for Held, who has found ways to fight himself into losses in each of his last three bouts.
Yeah. Something about fighters who manage to find a way to lose on this card. I don't know why. That's just what this card is about.
Yeah. Next up, middleweight bout, Oskar Piechota, Jonathan Wilson. And this is you.
Okay. Oskar Piechota is legit. He looks like a really, really good prospect, especially considering the fact that he's a middleweight, and middleweight is like basically every division, as we discovered, every division north of 170 is just old dudes who. Somebody did make a really good point, by the way, because we answered a question about this on the latest Heavy Hands, about why is everyone so old? Why do all the top 10 fighters seem to have tenure? But that's kind of the case even at 170 these days, from 170 to 265. And some of that, I think, is that somebody suggested that there are a good number of regional like light heavyweights and middleweights out there. It's just that they command higher prices. And so they are not incentivized to accept that 10 and 10 deal to get into the UFC when they can fight on regional German shows or whatever, regional Polish shows, and make $30,000, $50,000 for a fight. So I think Piechota is a good example of like what actually might be out there around this, like this size is a very good athletic, like a quick learning athlete who could probably do well in other sports.
I don't want to sidetrack this a lot, but I would say that there aren't actually a lot.
No, I know there aren't a ton. Just based on the bell curve of human size, there are automatically fewer and fewer the farther you go beyond 170.
I mean, the reason that there's such a flood of talent at 170 and 155 is because there are just so many people there that they can always find somebody. There are plenty of regional 155 and 170-pound fighters that are like hometown stars that are fighting and don't need to go to the UFC. Yeah. There are just so many more that aren't that the UFC can.
But I think it is also like, it has to also be a factor that like an 8-0 fighter at 135 is not going to command the same price tag that an 8-0 fighter at 205 does.
Depends on what part of the world you're in, honestly.
Yeah, but if the UFC's like, honestly, I just think people show up for big dudes fighting. So like, whatever the reason, they just. I will always be baffled by people's fascination with heavyweight fights, as if they are automatically. They're just not always that good.
Oh, come on, Connor. People love freaks.
That's what it is. Pichota's not a freak physically.
No, I know. I'm just.
Although by the standards of the UFC middleweight division, he actually is, because as I said, he is a good athletic man of about 200 pounds, which is pretty rare in the UFC in particular. And
it's the size and weight at which people usually make a lot more money being an athlete.
Yes, right. Piechota has a good boxing game. He's really, really comfortable in the pocket. He takes very nice angles. He keeps he does lots of things that you don't really see from most young MMA fighters. He keeps his chin behind his shoulder. He flashes a jab when people come at him, so they have something that occupies their eyes and he can take an angle while they're moving in. He's just a very well put together striker, and has just been obliterating people with strikes in his recent fights. Of course, the most recent one, not against I'm actually not the most recent, but the one before that was the last one I saw. The fight with Sergio Souza. He just obliterated the guy, set him up with the hands, and then, because it's MMA, caught him with the head kick as he was reacting to the combinations. Just looks very comfortable and smooth. And you have to assume that is going to be enough to beat Jonathan Wilson. And it's not that Jonathan Wilson isn't dangerous here. He can match Piechota in a lot of ways. He, like Piechota, is a very good athlete. He's got good timing. He's very quick when he lets his hands go. He's got some power, but he is not nearly as comfortable as Piechota in a fight. He does not react nearly as well when shots are coming back at him. I don't think he has as good of a sense of how to control the pace and the whereabouts of a bout. Piechota looks like a more experienced fighter than he is. Jonathan Wilson looks the way you might expect a 7-2 middleweight to look, or a light heavyweight, I guess. Is this his first fight at middleweight, by the way?
Yeah, this is his first fight at middleweight.
He wasn't a huge light heavyweight, I guess, but
he's not. I mean, he's 6'2". Like, he was a good sized light heavyweight.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just have to pick Piechota. I just think he's a lot more overall more controlled with his technique. And I don't think Jonathan Wilson has the right blend of like pressure and wrestling mix-ups and kicking game to make Pichota's boxing less effective. So I'm going with Piechota by first round KO.
Yeah, I mean, Wilson's a guy who is, he looks like a good athlete, and this is what you see a lot out of that sort of millennia MMA and guys who went through Explode. You see a lot of good athletes who are learning to fight late in life and learning all of the skills to fight late in life. No wrestling, no kickboxing, no boxing, no jiu-jitsu, none of that. Just learning it all. And that is what Jonathan Wilson looks like. And he's big and he's powerful and he's crafting himself reasonably into a range power striker. But it's a low output game that is not comfortably built on easily keeping range and is not like, you know, Enrique da Silva was able to just chew him up in the clinch over and over because Wilson doesn't have any good idea what to do in the clinch.
Yeah, it's really about it. Like Jonathan Wilson's style works against other Jonathan Wilsons.
Yeah.
Other inexperienced fighters who also don't really want to mix things up too much in the pocket.
Yeah, and Ion Kudalaba chewed him up at range and all fight just by being a much more proficient range striker.
Yeah. And
a much more proficient striker in the pocket. And Piechota, that's, you know, he can do that all day. And the worst part for Wilson is if he does try to take this down, Piechota is like could be potentially a world-class grappler. Like the kid was a grappling prodigy before he started his MMA career. Mm-hmm. And so there's not really an avenue for Wilson other than hoping to catch Piechota with a power shot and just hoping that he has the power to carry that off, which, you know, his can-crushing and gladiator challenge and then a knockout of one of the world's most knockoutable fighters in Chris Dempsey do not speak volumes to Wilson as a great puncher striker. So I would be pretty surprised if Piechota couldn't get this done.
Yeah, same here. Piechota's he's the big get on this card, man. He's the big prospect signing that I think people really need to pay attention to.
You know, the interesting thing will be how much damage can Jonathan Wilson take on his way through the fight, because he took a lot from Enrique da Silva, Enrique Frankenstein in that fight, and then Kudalaba teed off on him for 3 rounds without putting him away. So it could be a test for Piechota of like how long can he keep his game together.
Yeah, sure. Although I will say, you want to find out how good your chin is, suck yourself down, lose about 20 pounds more weight, and you will find out.
True. Yeah. Piechota opened at -210, adjusted up to -190, and is currently at -198, starting to fall a little bit. And Wilson opened at +160, adjusted down to +159, and is climbing now up to +162 after dropping a bit. So I definitely think these odds could be wider for Piechota. Wilson would have to show something pretty unlike what he's shown in the past to win this fight.
Are there total odds on the fight?
Let's see. Yeah, there's actually a ton of odds on this fight. Over or under a round and a half is +100. Over a round and a half is -120. Fight goes to decision +200, -260. And then, let's see, Piechota by TKO KO is +225. Piechota by submission +271. Piechota inside the distance -105. So there's plenty more too, but you know.
I'm just wondering if what the value might be in expecting if there are a lot of people expecting Wilson to get blown out early, and what it might be, because the one thing is that Wilson, well, like the one guy who destroyed him was the most crazily aggressive guy he fought, and that's not Piechota, not in the same way.
Yeah, Wilson, I think, is trying to craft a very safe distance game that involves him not getting hit a lot. So I
Which
would
is like
be
definitely a range at which I think he'll lose this fight still,
Yeah.
but will he be finished there?
Yeah. It's a tough
Yeah.
one. John Wilson has no shortage of toughness
Yeah,
or athleticism.
Yeah, something to think about.
Brings us to a light heavyweight bout: Jan Blachowicz, Devin Clark, and we can burn through this one because it's not a very interesting fight. Devin Clark should win it, pretty much. Blachowicz has even new improved Jan Blachowicz still only has a round of cardio.
Yep.
And he is not a good finisher at all. Ilir Latifi knockout be damned. Blachowicz just, all of his KSW finishing form has vanished in the UFC, most of which was by submissions. So there's not a real surprise that it went away when he started facing people who could actually function in a fully three-dimensional MMA bout. And Clark is not a good technical fighter anywhere, but he fights hard for multiple rounds. That's pretty much it. He's willing to be an aggressive wrestle grappler. He hits pretty hard, and he will just stay on. Like, Jake Collier put a hell of a pace on him, and Clark outpaced him to win.
Yeah. And if you're pushing a pace like that, and that alone is probably enough to beat Jan Blachowicz, who I don't know what it is, man. Conor McGregor syndrome. You do all this work to improve your stamina. You're monitoring your heart rate. You're really, really attentive to your fitness. And you come into a fight and you last about 45 seconds longer than you usually do. And then you're really tired again. It just happens to Jan Blachowicz, and he has not yet found a way to avoid it happening. And it's bound to happen if Devin Clark pushes a pace on him, which I expect Devin Clark to do. Really, he just has to not get caught with a perfect shot on the way in. He definitely can.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we saw that in the fight with Alex Nicholson. And while Clark is definitely tough, I think a lot of that is toughness based on like sort of seeing the punches coming. And you get your lights put out by a quick hook as you charge into the pocket that comes from outside your field of vision. Those are the kind of things Blachowicz can do. But he is also not at his most effective when he's being pressured. For a counterpuncher, he really likes people who sort of like try to dip in and out at long range. They try to counter in a way that they don't want to be in the pocket either. And he'll catch them before they can get out, or he'll catch them, with a shot as they're at long range. When somebody charges after him, he goes into, as most people do, he's more defensive and less looking for those openings.
I think also that he's at his best when he's countering, tends to be really light on his feet, trying to get away from people. And so he doesn't put much on his counters. So they don't land. Like, when he lands with his best power is when somebody just does not want to engage him, and he can just throw from range with abandon.
Yeah, and he was marching Pat Cummins down for a good portion of that first round when he was hurting him over and over again.
Yeah, so
Devin Clark, I actually do like this fight. It says a lot about how terrible the light heavyweight division is, that this is a relevant, meaningful fight. But as far as like just appreciating good matchmaking, I
like the fight. Yeah, it's just not a fight that needs a lot of breakdown to it.
No. It is just exactly the right bout to get Devin Clark into that like top 15 mix, and I expect that is what will happen.
Clark is a small favorite, opening at -150, adjusting to -142, and then dropping to -155. Blachowicz is opened at +110 and has risen consistently from there to +129. So it's a good fight to have tight odds. Blachowicz could catch him, but Clark, you just can't ignore his terrible gas tank.
Nope.
Women's strawweight bout next: Karolina Kowalkiewicz, Jodie Esquibel. And
happy to see Jodie Esquibel in the UFC. Yep. Super cool. This is my fight, right? It's just you. Okay. She's super cool, and she's married to Keith Jardine, which automatically makes her cooler in my book. She's kind of a worse version of Karolina Kowalkiewicz. That is basically what you can say. She can push the pace pretty well. She despite not being a great technician or like a really quick, snappy, athletic puncher, she is quite comfortable in range in the pocket. But she does end up taking a lot of punishment when she does that. And she's going to get beaten in the clinch, I think. I mean, that's really what this fight comes down to for me. Kowalkiewicz is among the best clinch fighters at the strawweight division. She's very strong there. She's aggressive when she sees openings for elbows, short punches, and knees. She takes them. She wrenches people off balance. She creates space. She has a fully formed striking-based clinch game. And as Pat pointed out on Heavy Hands this week, she has phenomenally strong hips. It seems to be sort of the basis of her. I mean, maybe that's a cop-out way of describing what she does, but sort of the basis of all of the surprising skills she has when somebody's can't get her off of top position or can't take her down or can't muscle her around in the clinch. She seems to just have really good stability with her lower body. It's very difficult to move her once you've tied up, which is the weird thing about Karolina Kowalkiewicz, is that she does not look athletic or strong or explosive at all when her feet are moving and she's throwing punches. She looks uncoordinated half the time. But once she gets her hands on you, you realize like she can hit hard and she's actually pretty powerful. She just needs to be rooted. And no matter how she approaches this matchup, I think Jodie Esquibel is going to give her those ranges to get to that clinch. Once she does, I think it kind of becomes up to Kowalkiewicz where the fight goes from there. And if you really like, one of Esquibel's big advantages in a lot of fights is pace. Kowalkiewicz can accept and probably exceed her pace. So I have to go with Karolina.
Yeah, Esquibel is kind of weird because both like Kowalkiewicz and Esquibel both have this. Well, Esquibel has this look of like she looks like she would just be this really impossible to move, bricked up fighter, and because she's pretty strong, but she does not thrive in fights where it's a test of strength versus strength. Like that is not where she's at her best. Where she's usually at her best is when she's getting to push a pace from boxing range, and because she's had a bunch of pro boxing bouts, and that's really where she's comfortable.
It's the best part of her game. She keeps a nice pumping jab. She throws good combinations. She stays balanced. Her boxing is absolutely her best skill.
And I think it's something that she's improved too with her comfort in the cage. Like her boxing has stepped up a lot in her past fights, like her Deanna Bennett win that she just had. She looked like she was really putting her hands together a lot better than ever before. She's starting to get better comfort there, but it's just, yeah, you can't bet on pushing a better striking pace than Kowalkiewicz, and you especially can't bet on it if you can't also control the clinch. I mean, what we saw to Rose Namajunas was Namajunas landing the better shots, doing good work from outside, pushing a pace, and then just getting slowed down and caught up in the, like, you know, not only maybe starting to feel like she couldn't keep that pace up at range, but then ending up getting caught in the clinch with Kowalkiewicz, who just started to wreck her there.
Yeah.
If Esquibel had a better top game, like she's got some enough power in, she's, you know, got that low to the ground frame that makes her able to get in on some good shots, but she doesn't have a great top game at all. And she's not any kind of submission threat. And that means that it's really like, even if she can get Kowalkiewicz down, it's not likely not going to be a place where she controls the fight. So it would really it would be a pretty, I don't know. There's not a lot of paths to victory for Esquibel here.
Right. Kowalkiewicz has been throughout her UFC career very difficult to control on the ground. It was really just that Claudia Gadelha was ready for her to immediately try to scramble free and got her in the transition, but nobody's really been able to hold her down.
No,
at all.
So it's a pretty clear fight in Kowalkiewicz's favor.
I agree.
On that, odds, Kowalkiewicz opened at -350, fell to -457, is currently at -467. And Esquibel opened at +250, jumped up to plus 350 and is currently at plus 352. So I don't know that we'd be looking at any kind of finish. Let's see. Over 2.5 is minus 275. Under 2.5 is plus 240. Other than that, I wouldn't. No. All right. Brings us to the main event now. Donald Cerrone, Darren Till. And this is one of those things where I can see the base parts for Darren Till to beat Donald Cerrone.
I know where you're going.
I severely doubt that he can put those into play.
Yeah.
Like, people who have beaten Donald Cerrone lately, not just, over his career, because Donald Cerrone has continued to improve over his career and get technically better. Even, even evidenced by his Robbie Lawler fight, where he just, looked like a much more comfortable puncher in that fight than he has in a lot of his other fights. The people who have beat him lately, Jorge Masvidal and Robbie Lawler, have done so, and even Rafael dos Anjos, have done so with Donald Cerrone, highly Donald Cerrone specific games. They have come out and said, I know what your weaknesses are, and I'm going to pick them apart. Your weaknesses are to body kicks. Your weaknesses are to slow starts. Your weaknesses are in dealing with a jab. And those are the ways that I will beat you. And they worked, but they were still tough. Like, especially the Masvidal and Lawler. Like, Masvidal beat Cerrone quickly, but until he did, it was a pretty tough fight. And I was watching that. And actually, one of the ways that Masvidal, I don't know. Like, one of the things I kept noticing in that fight was Masvidal did a whole lot of jabbing, just like this, like the Jake Shields jab with the hands, like, just kind of. Maybe he was closing his fist at the last instant. There's a lot of mix up in there where you couldn't really see, but a lot of just like, let me just make this really aggravating for you. And
I mean, I think the idea is just some kind of pressure on Donald Cerrone.
Yeah.
Just give him something in his face that he constantly has to think about. He can't not like be flinching and focusing on what's happening to him. He's put into this reactive mindset. That's when he's at his worst.
Yeah. And Masvidal, he landed hard body kicks.
Yeah.
And he landed a ton of jabs on his way to finally setting up the shots that dropped Cerrone, as Cerrone was sort of having to react and panic and not lead the fight himself. And Lawler just came out and said, okay, you're bad in the first round. I'm just going to take the fight to you in the first round and put it on you as hard as I can from moment one.
And then take the second round completely off before repeating the first round in round 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like, they were good strategies to beat Donald Cerrone.
Yeah.
Nothing, like, I can see Darren Till throwing body kicks to the liver from the left side. I could see him doing it. I could see him keeping a long jab going and keeping it in Cerrone's face and pressuring well consistently. I do not see Darren Till caring enough to adjust his game to Donald Cerrone to beat Donald Cerrone. Till seems like the supremely confident fighter who has never once in the world cared about who he is fighting. And to the point that even his wins in the UFC over much lesser competition are less impressive than they should be, because he does not care, like, because he has not spent any time adjusting his game to the person he's fighting.
Yeah, it's kind of what's magnetic about his game, though, is that like everybody ends up fighting his fight.
Well,
yeah,
when you're Jason Ayari and Bojan Velishkovic,
there's absolutely that, but there's also this thing. I actually it's funny because I made this comment thinking of something I'm writing about Arislandi Lara. But then in rewatching Darren Till's fight footage, Dan Hardy made the same exact remark specifically about Darren Till, which is that when people fight him, they always feel like they're just competitive enough that the fight is close, but they never know as well as he does whether or not they're winning the rounds. The fight just narrowly slips away. And so I have this feeling that Darren Till is the kind of guy who is not going to blow out Yasin Ayari, but will equally as effectively not blow out a much better fighter. You know what I mean?
It could be.
If he can convince them to fight his fight.
The thing that I think has me a bit more worried too is that I totally forgot it now. I had a point to make.
It's my fault. I'm sorry.
But what is it?
Darren Till controlling the pace.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the problem's controlling the pace. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. It's that Darren Till is, I think the quality that you're talking about is that Darren Till is a fighter that you have to work to beat. Like, you have to beat Darren Till. We've said this before, but
because his style is all about like increasing the amount of work you have to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole point is like, I'm going to fight at this super slow pace and just pick little openings, and you're going to have to work your ass off to get to me.
And you're going to have to go out and beat him. And he hasn't faced anyone who is capable of going out and beating him, anyone capable of taking him on meaningfully. And I think that, but like, at some point, there are people who are capable of just going out and beating him. Yeah. And Donald Cerrone absolutely should be one of those people. Like, if you're not going to pick up your pace at all, and you're not going to vary your strike selection, and you're not going to be more defensively sound, then at a certain level, there are certainly fighters who can go out and are capable of, even if you don't give a lot of easy openings, of going out and just implementing their game, which is a better game. And that should absolutely be Donald Cerrone.
Yeah. I'm with you more or less. I mean, I think like there is definitely it's a double-edged sword, right? There is definitely a vibe from Darren Till. He's like, boy, I shouldn't do a Scouse accent, but why would he change? He's already fucking great, He's already fucking. You got to get that nice German sound on that.
Okay, no, yeah, we're done. Accent hour is over.
He does have this mentality that has an effect on opponents. And it is backed up by a great amount of technical skill. He's got sharp footwork, excellent timing. He knows how to sort of play between doing nothing and like daring the other guy to go first, but also giving the other guy tons of little things to look at so that he, you know what I mean? So you're caught in this space where you feel if I lead, he's going to catch me. And if I try to counter, I don't know what he's going to do next, or I don't know when it's coming or at what range it's going to be thrown. And so a lot of people, like even relatively quick paced fighters, fall into a really slow pace when they fight Darren Till. I think that is his style, is slowing people down.
Yeah.
It is not the typical style that has beaten Donald Cerrone. The typical style that's beaten Donald Cerrone is like a good boxer who comes forward and hits him in the body, and does so early on.
Beating things up, frankly.
Yes, exactly. And so the really interesting thing for me in this fight is how much of an effect on Donald Cerrone's pace will Darren Till have? Because I have a strong feeling that as this fight goes on, it will only get better for Donald Cerrone as he gets past that first round. But I really wonder if in the first round he will come out and throw 10 strikes per minute, or if he will get into a drawn-out, thoughtful chess match with Darren Till. If he does, there are openings for Darren Till. There are absolutely defensive liabilities in Cerrone's game, and Till can pressure without having to throw at a high clip. It's not that he I'm not sure that he can throw at a very high pace, but he has developed a game that works despite that. The problem is that I'm not convinced that Darren Till has great stamina. Like if he does get pushed to a faster pace, I think he may surprise himself with how quickly he wears down. But B is the fact that Donald Cerrone just has so much offensive variety to his striking that if Darren Till, even when like round 3 rolls around and Darren Till has a 1.5 minute window of inactivity where he's taking a break, Cerrone is going to be attacking his legs. He's going to be throwing straight kicks to the body. The kicks in particular, Donald Cerrone is going to be capable of being more competitive than any other fighter Darren Till has faced in the UFC in kicking range.
Like Bojan Blachowicz hurt Till's legs badly.
If Bojan Blachowicz could chew up your leg with just like one type of low kick, then Donald Cerrone can do a lot worse. He is still one of the best kickers in the UFC, one of the best kickers in MMA, and it's not just power and speed, but his variety, timing, rhythm changes. He's a very clever and dangerous kickboxer. So, yeah, I think ultimately, I think that Cerrone is going to have to, when he starts sort of freezing Till up a little bit with his kicks and wearing him down, that he's going to get him down to the ground and finish him there. But I'm still really fascinated in the early going. And again, we're talking about Donald Cerrone here. So I'm going to pick somebody who's going to get caught with that perfect shot and it totally changes the complexion of the fight early. Cerrone is a decent candidate. And if Cerrone is a little stiff and predictable as he can be in the early going, comes out and telegraphs that first low kick and Till just catches it and sits down on a straight left hand, it might work. You know, it might work. Yeah. I really want to see how far Darren Till can go with this style. And I don't want to see the style change. I want to see him improve the facets of that style. I want to see him be better defensively and more aware of taking his angles and better at controlling his distance, not just using it. But the style itself is fascinating, and we don't see a lot of this style in MMA. So I'm really curious to see what's the upper limit of a neutralizing, spoiling kind of style that just forces other people to slow their games down to a crawl and then feel frustrated until the fight is over.
Yeah, it's the benefit of doing a lot of can crushing and the benefit of going out and what like a really good, a good regional development scene would do better is giving guys who have funky styles just time and space to work and hone those styles for years to the point that they're much more effective than they would be if you just try to enter the UFC and charge up the ranks with a funky style that doesn't tend to win rounds all that well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the style of like Darren Till is it's the style of a gamesman. It is the style of somebody who has attuned themselves to the way the sport works.
The other thing I would mention too, though, is there's a good chance that if Till comes out pushing a slow pace and trying to slow Cerrone down, Cerrone might just double leg him and submit him.
Yeah, people say that. I think the distance that Till keeps is going to make it pretty hard for Cerrone to hit that early shot. And most of his good takedowns do come early in the fight when he surprises people. But if Cerrone's aggressive in the beginning and he can get Till second guessing, then he's going to have a better chance of getting that shot. I do think, though, like Till's not going to come forward. So I can't imagine Till coming forward so recklessly that he gives Cerrone his hips. And if he's not, then
I mean, I'm just not sure how good a wrestler Till is still.
Sure, yeah. I think he looks pretty good, but it's hard to say based on level of competition.
Yeah, his level of competition is pretty poor there. And I know off his back, he's way too static.
Yeah.
He's way too willing to like play a guard game and try and
to just let the fight slide away.
Yep. So I would be interested to see if Cerrone just comes after him with wrestling early.
Yeah, I think he probably will. It's been a big part of his welterweight run so far. I'm again curious to see if it will work.
Yep. Cerrone is a slight favorite, not a big favorite, frankly. Opened at -165, adjusted down to -180, and has since risen slowly but surely to -155. And Till opening at +125, adjusted up to +152, and has slowly dropped to +129. I feel like there's a lot of people just feeling the magic out there on that because, I mean,
people want to, man. Even we had this discussion on Heavy Hands, and both of us are like, yeah, these are the things. Like these are what we like about Darren Till. There's a lot of things to be impressed about by him. This is a huge step up. and blah, blah, blah. And then we're like, all right, we're both going Cerrone by 4th round submission. And then like the first 3 comments I saw for that episode were like, bankroll on Till then? It's like, I didn't say that. Like, I just said it's not a bullshit matchup. It makes sense. These older welterweights need to be fighting these young prospects and everything. I'm glad it's happening.
Yep.
But I'm not picking him for a very good reason.
Yeah, there's just nothing in Till's run to date that suggests that he would beat Donald Cerrone. Yeah. That's really what it is.
Because there's nothing in his run that even remotely resembles Donald Cerrone.
No.
Yeah.
There's nothing that resembles it. There's nothing, the closest you would come would be his draw against
Nicholas Dalby.
Nicholas Dalby, who doesn't have Cerrone's speed or athleticism or
his size or
Dalby might have. Dalby's not
as tall as Cerrone, is he? He was very short compared to Till in that fight. Maybe I'm just exaggerating.
Cerrone. Well, I mean, how tall is Donald Cerrone?
I think they're both 6 foot.
Okay. So yeah, he was an inch shorter than Cerrone.
One of those ones where he looked a lot shorter than he probably was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Cerrone's, for his height is still not a big welterweight.
No.
Yeah, it's just there's Till's pace and his lack. Like I said, if he came out and he was like, I'm just gonna throw left body kicks, power left body kicks, and jab constantly, and set up the left hand behind a jab, he would have a serious shot of beating Cerrone.
Yeah, but this is fun to me. Like this is.
I know.
This is where we're hitting a new metagame stage in MMA, where we are now seeing a lot of fighters trying to grapple with the problem of their opponents being able to push a faster pace than them.
It's true.
Warlley, Darren Till. There are a few examples, but a lot of these guys are like, these are the smartest fighters who can't fight at that pace.
Yep.
They realize early on, like, I need to have a game, whether they think it consciously or not, they fall into a game that is specifically about preventing the pace from changing.
Yeah.
So it's not just that Till like can't push a pace, it's that he has a game that makes it so that he doesn't have to. So I don't know. There's something to Darren Till. It's just, I don't think it's time yet for him to ascend to the top of the division.
On that note, we should get out of here because I know you got other shit to do. So you can find me on Twitter at TheseAnytime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com. In our various roles, give this video a like. That's the thumbs up thing down there. That helps us a ton over on YouTube. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, BOTCOM. We will be back next week for UFC some shit. I don't remember.
There's not going to be many more depressed.
UFC Sao Paulo, Brunson versus Machida. So that's a good card. We will have a lot to talk about there. And thanks everyone for tuning in. See you soon.